Tonight, the stunning new developments in that deadly set shooting involving Alec Baldwin. Authorities confirming a live round was in the gun when the actor fired it, killing a cinematographer. Hundreds of other rounds of ammo removed from the set, including some that are believed to be real bullets. A crew member now admitting he did not check the weapon thoroughly before handing it to Baldwin. Could the actor face any criminal charges? The sheriff saying there was, quote, some complacency on set. Tonight on Top Story, the Sante Fe district attorney, the lead prosecutor on the case, sitting down for a live, in-depth interview. Also tonight, the tornado outbreak in the South. New video of a powerful twister racing over a Texas highway. Transformers blown out of the sky. Dozens of homes destroyed and several people injured. Meanwhile, in New England, hundreds of thousands of customers without power tonight after a deadly nor'easter battered the area. Al Roker is here to show us where all this extreme weather is headed. This just in, the new guidance from the CDC saying some Americans may need a fourth vaccine shot. Are booster mandates also on the way? This as coronavirus cases are dropping by nearly 60%. On the chopping block, Democrats scrambling to reach an agreement on President Biden's multi-trillion-dollar spending bill before he leaves for Europe. Major components of the bill, including paid family leave, already dropped. Caravan chaos, the new group thousands deep, pushing across borders. Tonight, stories from the inside. Migrants turning on an alleged smuggler, taking him to the police as violence erupts on the march to the U.S. And pitching through the pain, the World Series moment. A Braves hurler hit with a grounder estimated to be traveling at 102 miles per hour, breaking his leg. What he did next is truly amazing. Top Story starts right now. And good evening, I'm Tom Llamas. We begin Top Story tonight with breaking news. Authorities confirming Alec Baldwin fired a real bullet in that deadly movie set shooting. Sheriff's investigators in Sante Fe saying the actor was given a gun with a live round when he fired a shot that killed cinematographer Halyna Hutchins and injured the director. Hundreds of pieces of evidence removed from the scene, including what is believed to be other real bullets and the lead projectile that killed Hutchins. The sheriff says Baldwin was told the Colt revolver he had was safe to use during a rehearsal, but also says there was complacency on set. The actor and others now being questioned. And we're also learning tonight the film's assistant director, who allegedly gave Baldwin the gun, told authorities he didn't check the weapon thoroughly. Investigators not ruling out criminal charges, and the Sante Fe district attorney who is leading the prosecution joins Top Story tonight live. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but we want to start tonight with Miguel Almaguer, who leads us off from New Mexico.
On the set of Rust, investigators now say Alec Baldwin fired a single live round, a real bullet that killed and traveled through cinematographer Halyna Hutchins and was pulled out of the shoulder of director Joel Souza, who was standing behind her. Inside this church, in a scene similar to this one, Baldwin was handed a Colt 45 that he was told was safe to use before he pulled the trigger during rehearsal.
And if the sheriff's office determines during our investigation a crime has occurred and probable cause exists, an arrest or arrests will be made and charges will be filed.
Had two people accidentally shot on a movie set.
Interviewing the 16 cast and crew members who were inside the church during the shooting, authorities have now seized 600 items of evidence. Among them, 3 guns and 500 rounds of ammunition, both blanks and real bullets. The single round that killed Hutchins now in the hands of the FBI.
Inside the revolver that Alec Baldwin used, were there other live rounds inside the chamber?
Not that we're aware of.
With Baldwin questioned multiple times, investigators have also interviewed the 2 other crew members who handled the gun and are in charge of safety, armorer Hannah Gutierrez-Reed and assistant director Dave Halls. According to a new search warrant, when questioned by investigators, Dave Halls told them Hannah showed him the firearm. He could only remember seeing 3 rounds. He advised he should have checked them all, but didn't.
The 2 people who handled the weapon in this case, whose job it was to ensure safety, obviously made some serious missteps. Shouldn't they face criminal charges?
We just can't say that at this point because the investigation's not complete. We know that mistakes happened. We're not exactly sure who did it.
Authorities say basic safety protocols, like banning live bullets from the set, were clearly not followed. Investigators confirm they're now looking into reports staff on the set of Rust may have taken live target practice when they weren't filming. Tonight, fatal mistakes in this deepening probe.
All right, Miguel joins us now live from Sante Fe. Miguel, you got to look at some behind-the-scenes video of this production. What did you see?
Well, Tom, in that behind-the-scenes video, we could clearly see the handling of weapons. We described that handling to some safety experts who said it raised some serious concerns and red flags. Meantime, we should also point out the governor here in the state of New Mexico is calling for tighter gun restrictions on sets moving forward. Tom?
All right, Miguel Almaguer for us tonight. Miguel, thank you. I now want to bring in Sante Fe District Attorney Mary Carmack-Altwies, who is joining Top Story tonight. Mary, thanks so much for joining us and talking to us. I want to start where Miguel just left off right there. That behind-the-scenes video, are you aware of it, and is it part of your investigation?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what he actually saw, but yes, we are aware that there are behind-the-scene videos. I know that the sheriff has collected those, and detectives are looking at them.
So, you know, this is not your typical crime scene. We're talking about a movie set here. How challenging is this investigation?
It's very challenging. This is a movie set that gets used a lot, and so there are spent casings, I think, all over the place on that ranch. And so discerning which spent casing is from the Rust production and which is from some other production earlier in the year is pretty difficult. They are doing an incredible job, though, and but that is one of the reasons that this investigation will take a while. It's incredibly complex.
Is that part of the reason why hundreds of pieces of ammunition have been taken from the set?
The hundreds of pieces of ammunition were taken directly from the armorer's cart and I believe the prop truck. So they're not being gathered off the ground, if you will. But I know that they were looking around the ground to make sure there were no more live bullets or other pieces of evidence.
Is it possible someone goes to jail for the shooting of Halyna Hutchins?
I think it's way too early to speculate on that.
You know, earlier, going back to these bullets and the casings, we know the sheriff said they recovered the shell casing, the actual shell casing from the bullet that sadly killed Hutchins and the lead projectile that also went into the director's shoulder. Explain to our viewers, what types of clues can your team pull from those pieces of evidence?
So that's in general, they're going to be testing for fingerprints, for DNA. They will test for ballistics, tool marks, perhaps. There's a wide array of testing that will take place on both the gun, the projectile, and the casing.
Mary, I got to ask you, and we heard this from the news conference that you attended today there with the sheriff, how did two people inspect the gun and not know there was a live round in there?
I think that is the question that remains to be answered and is probably the linchpin of the entire case.
So I got to ask you this as well. How important is Alec Baldwin to this investigation?
Well, obviously, he's very important. He's the one that pulled the trigger. He's the one that was holding the gun. And so he's very important. Does that mean that charges will be filed? Not necessarily. It also doesn't mean that they won't be filed.
Is he considered the key witness to this case?
I think it's a little premature to say key witness. Certainly, he is a witness. There were 16 other witnesses, I believe 16, in the church structure. So he is one of the main witnesses. I think he was right there. Obviously, he was right there when it happened. And so he is a very important witness. I don't know that I would characterize him as the key witness at this point.
You said people have been cooperative and giving interviews, more than one in some cases. Is anyone bringing an attorney with them, quote unquote, lawyering up at this point?
Not thus far.
Okay.
We've been very pleased with the cooperation that we've received.
Is this simply a case that possibly one live round got mixed in with either dummies or blanks? Is that what cost Halyna her life?
It's very likely that is something that's one of the scenarios that we are exploring, and it is likely that that's what happened.
You know, today we heard the sheriff say today at that news conference that there's been some complacency on set. Can you explain that comment?
Well, I think he was talking about the safety protocols and sort of industry standards that were not being followed based on the information that they've gathered and some news reports. And so he was simply stating that from what we have seen in the investigation so far, certain things that should have happened were not happening, and certain things that obviously should not have happened did happen. And we're going to get to the bottom of that and why that happened and if that's a criminal act.
Fair to say from what you've seen so far that corners were cut on this set in some regards?
I think corners were definitely cut on this set.
Okay. At this point, have you actually seen the bullets in question? And are they easy to decipher between the actual bullet that killed Helena and something that would be considered a dummy or a blank bullet?
I have seen pictures of the casing and bullets that were on her on the armorer's cart. As a layperson, someone who is not that familiar with guns and certainly not with Colt 45 guns, it would have been very difficult for me to tell the difference.
So the bullets are very similar, even though they're how lethal they are is very different.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. It's been nearly a week. Why is it too early to comment on charges just yet?
Because not everyone has been interviewed, because I think it will really depend on the investigation, finding out where those live rounds came from, who or what put them there, how they got mixed in with dummy bullets, what sort of safety protocols or what all safety protocols were not followed, and who all knew about it.
You know, there's been some reporting that during downtime, crew members were taking target practice. Can you confirm that?
That is unconfirmed at this point with regard to the investigation. We've certainly heard news reports about it, but it's unconfirmed.
Okay. As a legal matter, can you give people an example of when something crosses over from a simple accident to criminal negligence?
Well, so let me address criminal negligence at this point. So in New Mexico, our equivalent to a criminally negligent homicide is what's called involuntary manslaughter. And it is equivalent, but it is a slightly higher bar than criminal negligence. It requires a willful disregard for the safety of others. And then that's coming directly from our jury instructions. And so it is more akin to a recklessness standard than a negligence standard. And it's just a slightly higher bar. And so I can't go into specifics about when it crosses from accidental to negligence to then onto recklessness. That's what our investigation will tell us.
Finally, can you promise the family of Helena Hutchins that they will get justice?
I think that depends on what the family of Helena Hutchins views as justice. And we will do everything in our power to communicate with them, to keep them apprised of the investigation once we can start releasing more details. And we will, keep them in our thoughts and our prayers. And certainly with regard to my office, we have robust victim advocacy services, and we will offer those if criminal charges do come out of this.
Okay, Santa Fe District Attorney Mary Carmack Altwies, we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, the other big story everybody's talking about this week, of course, back-to-back catastrophic weather events, from tornadoes to a bomb cyclone. We saw wild winds, property damage, and high water rescues, all leading to the chaos that left thousands in the dark. Stephanie Gosk has the latest.
Oh my gosh. Harrowing scenes on the roads in Texas today. Apparent tornadoes touching down on a highway in Orange County. Roughly 40 homes with major damage. At least 8 reported tornadoes, 2 confirmed, hitting hard in Texas and Louisiana. Houses in Lake Charles almost completely destroyed. Meanwhile, that slow-moving nor'easter keeps punishing New England.
The wind kept blowing harder and harder last night, taking trees down and power lines. Here in Duxbury, an elevated station clocked a gust at 104 miles an hour.
That's hurricane-strength winds. Did you have any idea that this storm was going to be as strong as this?
No. We've been through 2 hurricanes on this property, and we've never had the damage that we've had.
3 trees crashed into Lynn Leary McDonald's roof.
I ran to the front bedrooms where the children were, and I literally grabbed them. I thought the house was collapsing.
The storm intensified so rapidly, it turned into a so-called bomb cyclone.
Bomb cyclones have occurred in the past, but they're occurring more frequently, and when they do occur, they're achieving greater intensities.
It was the same thing that happened on the West Coast earlier in the week, leaving roads impassable and flipping semi-trucks. Both storms broke October records.
There is an underlying factor, and that's the warming of the oceans caused by global warming.
And there will be no rest for the weary. More stormy weather is on its way. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, Duxbury, Massachusetts.
We thank Stephanie for that report, and there is extreme weather all over the country tonight. Al Roker joining Top Story right now to give us a sense of what's going on. And Al, you're going to start down south?
Yeah, that's right. Tom, we are looking at this line of thunderstorms. You can already see. In fact, we've got tornado watches out till 11 o'clock tonight. This system will be pushing to the east. Not only that, we are looking at a risk of severe weather stretching from Louisiana all the way to Florida. We're talking about 5 million people at the risk of 70-mile-per-hour winds, tornadoes, isolated hail. Then tomorrow, that system moves to the south and to the east, and you can see from Fort Myers all the way up to Wilmington, 15 million people at risk for severe weather. Wind gusts, 60 miles per hour, tornadoes. This system will be pushing to the east overnight, bringing strong storms across the Gulf, heavy rain for parts of the Midwest from Kansas City all the way down to Atlanta by tomorrow. It continues to move to the east tomorrow with that risk of severe weather from North Carolina on into Florida. We're talking about rainfall amounts that are really going to start to spike, and then we get another soaking here in the Northeast on into New England. Flooding possible because the ground already saturated. Look at these rainfall totals. We're talking about anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of rain down through the Gulf, but then you get into the Northeast, the Appalachians, and the Mid-Atlantic states, Tom. We're talking anywhere from 1 to 3 inches of rain. So flooding still a possibility. And of course, with all the leaves and the coming down, we've got storm drains that are clogged. Flooding a real possibility.
All right, Al, we thank you for that. A lot going on out there. We also want to turn to some breaking news on the COVID front. There is good news in the fight against the virus, but now the CDC says a 4th shot may be needed in some cases. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez reports.
After a roller coaster pandemic so far, tonight more positive signs. New COVID cases in the U.S. are down 57% since their last peak on September 1st and 16% over the past week. Hospitalizations have dropped 54% since late August.
We are now heading in the right direction. But with cases still high, we must remain vigilant heading into the colder, drier winter months.
We're back to where we started.
When we visited UF Health in Jacksonville this summer, the hospital was treating more than 200 COVID patients. Now, just 17.
It's obviously very reassuring. My hope is that the high numbers of those who are vaccinated in July and August really have made the biggest difference in this.
But while there is improvement across the country, a few areas with low vaccination rates are still hotspots. Billings Clinic in Montana hopes its caseload is plateauing. Still, it's urging caution over the winter as more Americans gather for the holidays.
We're very worried about what's going on currently, and we're worried that it could get worse.
A bright spot, though, the possibility that younger kids may soon get vaccinated if the CDC signs off as early as next week. Some states are already planning ahead. New York's governor says she does not anticipate needing mass vaccination sites, instead relying on pediatrician offices and local pharmacies.
Parents have been waiting for this, schools have been waiting for this, and this is really a breakthrough.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez joins us now outside a pharmacy here in New York City, which eventually may give out those COVID vaccines for children. But Gabe, I want to talk about another headline involving COVID-19. The CDC now saying potentially a 4th COVID shot may be needed?
Yeah, that's right, Tom. There's updated guidance, the CDC saying that some immunocompromised adults will be eligible potentially for a 4th shot at least 6 months after getting their 3rd.
So, Gabe, as we talk about a 3rd and potentially a 4th shot, have we seen anywhere across the country where vaccine booster mandates are in place?
Well, Tom, it's still very early for that. Keep in mind that these boosters are authorized for emergency use, but not fully approved. Still, we haven't heard of any booster mandates coming from cities and states. It's possible that perhaps down the line, some more private employers might do that. And for example, we did hear of at least one hospital in New Jersey that is now announcing a booster mandate for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Tom?
All right, Gabe, thank you for that. Let's head to Capitol Hill now. In the latest round of negotiations for the president's social safety net plan, key Democratic senators meeting with White House officials as the party tries to agree on what's in and what's out. NBC News chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker has those details.
Tonight, the urgent scramble by Democrats to reach agreement on President Biden's multi-trillion-dollar spending plans that he wants to have finalized before he leaves for his high-stakes trip to Europe tomorrow. With top negotiators shuttling back and forth between the White House and Capitol Hill, Democratic leaders struck an optimistic note.
An agreement is within arm's length, and we are hopeful that we can come to a framework agreement by the end of today.
But there are still a slew of unresolved issues between moderates and progressives, including how to pay for it. Now, a newly suggested billionaire's tax that would tax the revenue of those who earn $100 million or more in 3 consecutive years, targeting the 700 wealthiest Americans, including Amazon's Jeff Bezos and Tesla's Elon Musk. But there are questions over whether it is constitutional, and key moderate Joe Manchin is already blasting it.
I don't like the connotation that we're targeting different people.
While other Democrats are raising questions about what could be cut out. Tonight we learned negotiators have dropped paid leave from the package.
It would be devastating. It'd be devastating for working women.
We asked, would the president delay his departure time tomorrow? Could that timeline get pushed back if negotiators are still working and potentially close to reaching a deal tomorrow?
There's some flexibility in the morning, but I would not suggest that he's going to delay his trip. He doesn't have the space to delay it much.
Kristen joins us now from the White House. Kristen, walk us through the paid family leave. We understand it was reportedly dropped from the bill as Democrats inch closer to an agreement. What's still included?
Well, progressives are very upset about the paid leave issue, Tom, and with the likely loss of that, it's now the second major campaign promise that the president will not fulfill in this moment, alongside free community college. So as for what's in the second part of your question, billions of dollars for universal pre-K, a 1-year extension of the child tax credit, and some funding to combat climate change. But even that has been significantly pared back, all as the president prepares to leave for Europe for some key summits tomorrow. Tom.
All right, Kristen, thank you for that. We want to stick with what's happening on Capitol Hill tonight and the Democrats' latest plan to pay for the Biden agenda, the so-called billionaire tax, already facing bipartisan pushback. NBC News senior business correspondent Steph Rule joins us now live tonight on Top Story. So, Steph, Democrats are aiming for people who have $1 billion in assets or receive $100 million in earnings for 3 years. How would this plan work?
Well, listen, a lot of people are looking for this, not just Democrats. Think about this. In 2009, Jeff Bezos, he was worth about $6 billion. In 2021, he was worth about $170 billion. Minimum wage in 2009, $7.25. In 2021, $7.25. So we've actually heard from people on both sides of the aisle that are frustrated, that want the ultra wealthy, who are professionals sort of swan diving through loopholes to finally pay their fair share. Now, the way this is structured, and Kristen said it, there's a lot of pushback. Those who earn over $100 million. But here's the dirty little secret. Super wealthy people almost never, ever paid themselves that kind of money in salary. So it wouldn't really impact that many people. If they do move forward with this idea to tax people who are worth more than $1 billion over the course of the last 3 years, that could impact about 700 people. That's a very big number. You know, some are saying, why is it that Joe Manchin would push back on that? West Virginia, for example, is a state without one single billionaire. So this could bring in a lot of money, and a lot of people support it. One thing I would note, though, Tom, besides just the billionaire's tax, what's getting a lot of support is this minimum corporate tax. We always talk about corporations. They theoretically pay 21% in taxes. Well, over 50 major companies in the last year paid nothing in taxes. Companies you know, Nike, Salesforce, FedEx. The way this minimum tax would work, Every company of that size would be paying at least 15%. And this is hugely important to the Treasury Department because Janet Yellen just negotiated over the last few weeks over 130 countries agreeing to have a minimum tax. If we don't get on board for that, we're talking the talk and we're not walking the walk.
Steph Rule for us tonight here on Top Story, breaking down what are some very complicated issues and helping us understand them. Steph, thank you for that. We want to turn now to the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse, the teenager charged with homicide, allegedly killing 2 men at a protest after the shooting of Jacob Blake last summer. A judge ruling the men who died cannot be called victims during the trial, but later saying they could be called rioters or looters, many calling that decision a double standard. NBC News correspondent Megan Fitzgerald reports.
Just days before Kyle Rittenhouse is set to stand trial for murder, a Wisconsin court laying down controversial ground rules.
The word victim is a loaded word. And I think alleged victim is a cousin to it.
Kenosha County Judge Bruce Schroeder ruling the 3 men shot by Rittenhouse during protests last August cannot be referred to as victims, but leaving the door open for them to be called rioters or looters.
Let the evidence show what the evidence shows, and if the evidence shows that any or more than one of these people were engaging in arson, rioting, or looting, then I'm not going to tell the defense they can't call them that.
The assistant district attorney and many on social media calling the decision a double standard.
The terms that I'm identifying here, such as rioters, looters, arsonists, are as loaded, if not more loaded, than the term victim, Your Honor.
But Judge Schroeder, who has objected to the use of the word victim in past cases until a person has been convicted, standing firm.
He's made it a bit of a circus because now we're going to litigate what word are we going to use in front of the jury. And that's a problem. It takes the jury away from the central question of the case.
Rittenhouse charged with felony homicide for shooting and killing Joseph Rosenbaum and Anthony Huber, and with attempted homicide for wounding Gage Groskrautz. Rittenhouse allegedly showing up to demonstrations following the police shooting of Jacob Blake, armed with an AR-15 style assault rifle when he was just 17 years old. Video shared on social media appears to show Rittenhouse on the ground, firing a long gun as protesters flee in horror. Rittenhouse was arrested following the deadly riot and later released on bond. He has pleaded not guilty on all charges.
All right, Megan Fitzgerald joins us now live from Chicago. So, Megan, this hearing likely was the last before the trial begins on Monday. Walk us through what happens next.
So Rittenhouse has opted for a jury trial, so jury selection will begin on Monday. His defense will likely say that the now 18-year-old acted in self-defense. But, Tom, if he is found guilty on all charges, he faces life in prison. Tom?
Megan Fitzgerald on a case that we will be covering next week right here on Top Story. All right, Megan, thank you for that. Still much more ahead tonight. The unprecedented storm devastating Italy. Roads and homes underwater. The flash flooding now turning deadly with more rain on the way. Plus, the mother and her boyfriend behind bars tonight after her abandoned children were found inside an apartment along with the remains of their sibling. The horrifying details from inside this Texas home. And reverse discrimination? The man winning a $10 million lawsuit after he says he was replaced at his job in an effort to boost diversity and inclusion. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to Top Story. We turn to a story now in North Carolina where a healthcare marketing executive was fired in 2018, now winning a $10 million lawsuit. The man alleging he was replaced for both being a male and being white. His former employer fighting back. Priscilla Thompson has more.
$10 million. That's how much a federal jury has awarded a man who says he was fired for being a white male. David Duvall, a former top executive at Novant Health in North Carolina, claims he was let go in 2018 because of the company's efforts to diversify leadership positions.
No performance issues whatsoever, just out of the clear blue sky. Was fired 5 days short of his 5th year when he was supposed to get a bump in severance from 12 to 18 months, given in his tenure.
Luke Largess is Duvall's attorney. He argued the termination was a violation of the Civil Rights Act, which bans workplace discrimination on the basis of race or gender. Novant Health denied firing Duvall for the, quote, sole purpose of achieving diversity. In court documents, they allege Duvall was terminated for, quote, deficient performance and delegation of the critical duties of his position to his subordinates.
What was you all's response to those claims?
They were complete nonsense.
In recent years, there have been several high-profile cases alleging discrimination against white workers, including lawsuits against YouTube, Google, and Starbucks. This verdict comes as calls for greater equity and inclusion in the workplace grow, and as companies aim to address historic hiring, pay, and promotion gaps that have disadvantaged minority workers.
Although there may be some discrimination against white people, most of the discrimination still dominates against Black people in racial discrimination.
According to a wide-ranging 2021 report by McKinsey, white men make up 35% of entry-level employees, but are 62% of all C-suite executives. That's compared to minorities who account for just 17% of top execs. That's why some companies are turning to consultants like Allison Manswell for help increasing diversity.
What should companies be thinking about as they're working to diversify their ranks without running afoul of the laws that protect against discrimination?
If it is leading towards termination, people deserve a fair chance to correct their behavior, make any changes. We need to avoid language that starts to sound like this, meaning we have these goals that we set for 2020 and make it sound as if we're going to bulldoze our way to those goals, make illogical, unfair decisions in the process.
A spokesperson for Novant Health tells NBC News they are, quote, extremely disappointed with the verdict, vowing to pursue all legal options, including appeal, adding this verdict will not change Novant Health's steadfast commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity for all.
What message do you hope this verdict sends?
The message is not to abandon diversity and inclusion. It's to do it legally, do it lawfully.
All right, Priscilla Thompson joins us now on set. Priscilla, you were just telling me they are going to appeal this. You spoke to a lot of legal experts. Is this going to set a legal precedent?
Well, to be clear, the legal experts we spoke to say less than 10% of these race-based discrimination cases involve white people. The vast majority of them are people of color. But there is concern that this will set a precedent or have far-reaching implications for many companies that may be looking to include these diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts who say they're going to stay away from it because they don't want to face these types of allegations.
And we should also point this out for viewers. This happened in 2018. This happened pre-George Floyd, before companies tried to and started to really look at their companies, and there was the racial reckoning.
Right. And there was a movement going on prior to the murder of George Floyd, including in 2015 with the Oscars So White controversy, and in 2016 when the U.S. women's soccer team filed their discrimination suit alleging the gender wage differences. And so this is something that we've seen, and experts that I spoke with said that some of these lawsuits are pushback to folks who have been historically overrepresented in the workplace, and now these workplaces are becoming more diverse, and it can feel like discrimination when in actuality, in many cases, in most cases, in fact, the experts I've spoken with said this is just equity.
All right. Priscilla Thompson, thank you for that. Coming up, a Halloween tradition canceled, why the White House is not welcoming trick-or-treaters this year, and caravan chaos as thousands of migrants head towards the U.S. They've clashed with authorities, but now there's trouble within the group. We'll take you inside. Vaughn Hilliard joins Top Story tonight with some stories from this caravan, including the migrants recognizing an alleged human smuggler and taking him to the police. That video coming up. You're watching Top Story. Back now with Top Story's news feed, and we begin really with a horrific case out of Texas. A mother and her boyfriend arrested after the skeletal remains of her child were found inside a Houston apartment. Gloria Williams and Brian Coulter facing a slew of charges on Sunday. The three abandoned children were found living in squalor along with the remains. The oldest sibling saying his brother had been dead for at least a year. Police say that it appears the child was 8 when he died. All the children showed signs of serious physical abuse. The White House will not host a Halloween celebration this year. The annual trick-or-treating on the South Lawn will not be taking place because President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden will be traveling to the G20 summit. The White House will be lit up in orange on Halloween instead. And we're getting our first look at our new Buzz Lightyear movie, but all the buzz seems to be about his appearance. Many on social media surprised to see the famous character has a full head of hair under his space helmet. The film, which stars Chris Evans, is the origin story of the real human astronaut who inspired the toy we know and love. All right, we now turn to the Americas and look at the stories coming out of the U.S. and across Latin America. We take you to Mexico, where a migrant caravan of thousands is heading north to the U.S. border. They face many dangers along the way, but some are lurking from within the caravan. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliards has a story.
This latest caravan passing through Mexico, now numbering in the thousands. These migrants, many from Honduras, Guatemala, Haiti, and El Salvador, stopping for rest, days after barreling through a blockade of Mexican police and National Guard. The migrants now, though, are still more than 1,100 miles away from the United States. They're facing a lack of essentials like water, but some worry about the dangers lurking from within. This man didn't want anyone to recognize him. He is accused of taking $1,500 from this woman, Cecilia Guzman. According to her, he assured her that he's been a human trafficker for over 25 years and was going to take her nephew to the U.S. Instead, he disappeared with the money. She says she saw him on TV walking with the caravan, and she went out to hunt him down.
Entonces se le dio a él $1,500 aquí en Tapachula y ya empezó a que lo iba a llevar y entonces ya no lo llevó.
Guzman turning him into the police. But others say it's not only human smugglers they are afraid of, they too have to protect themselves from other migrants. This Honduran, Scarlett, said she was beaten up by multiple men because she's a lesbian.
Dice que yo soy hombre, que yo tengo que salir de ahí porque solo las mujeres se podían quedar, y sí soy mujer.
Others say they are escaping violence and discrimination in their home countries, the same violence and discrimination that follows them on the caravan.
Salí pensando que estos países son libres. Y no es así.
The destination still months away. But despite the turmoil from within, this caravan is continuing on.
All right, Vaughn joins us now live in studio. So, Vaughn, we've been tracking this caravan. The U.S., they're eventually going to reach the border. Do they know that this caravan is moving north?
Right. The U.S. administration is aware that caravans like this are moving north here. And when you're talking about the U.S. response, right, they've urged Mexico to do more to stem the flow of these caravans. That's what you saw in those last videos there of Mexican police and the National Guard trying to form a blockade to keep them from moving northward. But when you're talking about thousands of individuals, that's not going to stop them. So when you're talking about 1,100 more miles, they do reach the U.S. border, let's assume that, then you're dealing with Title 42, which the Biden administration has continued to use. That it's a public health law they're using during this pandemic to justify turning away those asylum seekers, like we saw last month with those Haitians there. You still, out of the 1.7 million individuals that have shown up at the U.S. border this last year, a majority of them, nearly 2/3 of them, have been removed.
Real quick, when do they estimate this group will reach the border?
It could take more likely weeks, but potentially even months.
Okay, Vaughn Hilliard, we appreciate your reporting. Thank you. Now to top stories, global watch, and we begin with the deadly storm wreaking havoc on southern Italy. The hurricane-like storm triggering dangerous flash flooding and mudslides. Roads washed away and residents told to stay indoors. Look at that. At least 2 people killed and more missing. The area experiencing a year's worth of rain in just a couple of days, with more on the way. Senators in Brazil are backing charges against the president there over his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. A Senate panel has voted to recommend criminal charges, including crimes against humanity. The report will be handed to the chief prosecutor, who is also an appointee of the president. More than 600,000 Brazilians died from the coronavirus, the death toll only second to the U.S. And a treat for Squid Game fans in South Korea. Netflix has installed the red light, green light doll. That is so creepy. From the show in Seoul's Olympic Park. Why would they do that? The 13-foot figure replicates the voice and music, and fans can even play the game, minus the murder, of course. The doll will be on display until late November. Okay. Staying overseas now, we turn to Afghanistan. It's been 10 weeks since the dramatic fall of Kabul and the frantic evacuation of 6,000 Americans and 95,000 Afghans. The struggle now ongoing to evacuate those who work with the U.S. military. Tonight, Cynthia McFadden brings you the story of two of those families.
Today is the first day of a new life for four little sisters who left their home and all their belongings to flee the Taliban. The last few months making their way here have been grueling, fraught with danger and uncertainty. Shabana, Adila, Raima, Shamim. But this day, their father, formerly a baker for the U.S. military, got the keys to their new home in New Haven, Connecticut. An ending and a beginning. Thanks to IRIS, a refugee resettlement group in New Haven, the family will start a new life with lots of support. But on the other side of New Haven, another Afghan family is in crisis. A former top translator for the U.S. military desperate to bring his family home to Connecticut, where they've been living for the past 5 years.
I feel hopeless because there's nothing, has been done.
We're calling him Abdul and hiding his face to protect his family, all green card holders on the brink of becoming American citizens. This summer, they returned to Afghanistan to visit relatives, believing it was safe. Now, Abdul says they are in grave danger, targeted by the Taliban because of his work for America.
We feel like we're left behind.
When you saw what was happening at the airport, and you realized your family was there.
The Taliban, they were firing at the people there.
His children are terrified. They've moved 3 times since August, now living with 16 relatives in a 2-bedroom apartment. The kids tell us the Taliban have big guns.
But we need to get out of here.
I'm gonna get you guys out of there. Just be patient. Don't try to leave the house.
His words, he says, are beginning to ring hollow even to him. His children asking questions he can't answer.
Are we gonna be stuck here forever? Are we gonna die here? When you hear those conversations with your 8-year-old son, it is very difficult.
During Abdul's 11 years working for the U.S. military, he was often on the front lines.
I've had American soldiers wounded right alongside me. I was able to drag them, got them out of the danger zone to safety.
So you saved lives.
He also translated for American heavyweights like Lindsey Graham and John McCain.
There was a lot of promises made, If you're loyal, you would be eligible to go to the U.S. and have better life.
In months of begging for help, Abdul says he's never heard from the State Department. Usually, Chris George resettles refugees in Connecticut, but these days he's trying to help some of those same people escape the Taliban, including Abdul's family. NBC News has learned 30 refugees from Connecticut alone are currently stranded.
The longer they wait, the more organized the Taliban will become, and the closer they will get to the people who are hiding.
These children are living in terror.
Yes, they are bargaining chips in a high-stakes game of diplomacy.
Some of them just 8 years old. So George and his team have been waging their own covert operation to help get their clients home. Recently, some families have gotten out, but it's a tiny number compared to the thousands of people the State Department acknowledged have the legal status to live in the U.S.
I'm reluctant to criticize the U.S. government because they are our avenue out. But we've got green card holders stuck there that are 1 year away from becoming U.S. citizens. What is going on?
Is "we're trying" a good enough answer?
I want to see results. They are losing hope. And they're asking me, are you going to forget about us? And I say, we will not rest until you come home.
It's a big commitment.
And I'm not getting much rest.
Just miles away, the family with 4 little girls rejoices. They are together, and they are safe. And that is all Abdul wants.
Cynthia McFadden joins us now on set. Cynthia, I was there with you on the Today Show this morning when this story first ran, and there's actually some movement when it comes to Abdul's family, who's still stuck in Afghanistan.
A little bit. After our story aired this morning, Abdul called Senator Graham's office, and he said, you know, I need some help. I translated for the senator. And when he got through to a staffer, the staffer said, we just watched you on the Today Show, and offered to help him in any way they could and gave him some paperwork to fill out.
All right, hopefully that leads to some kind of change. But we heard in your story there are thousands of Afghanis who have a connection to the U.S. through the military or they hold green cards.
Yeah, exactly. And the State Department, the Secretary of State testified before Congress that they don't know precisely how many green card holders are stranded. I don't know what's more upsetting, the fact that they don't know precisely how many, or that indeed it appears to be thousands and thousands.
And you were saying Abdul's family, they're getting word because every day it gets more and more intense and the Taliban is creeping closer and closer. They feel?
Yeah, because the Taliban's getting more organized, right? And they already know that there are eyes on this family. Abdul has 3 brothers. The 3 brothers also all work for the U.S. military. So the Taliban is hunting them. They've moved 3 times since August, and they are now, you know, living with 16 relatives in 2 bedrooms. You know, the pressure is on. It's not just because it's uncomfortable. Their lives are at risk.
Abdul gets his family out and they get him out fast. Cynthia, thank you. Coming up, the Atlanta Braves pitcher breaking his leg in the middle of a game. What he did next is truly hard to believe. Stay with us. Tonight, we take you to the World Series for an incredible moment, even if you don't like baseball. Steve Patterson has that story.
Tonight, a World Series Game 1 wonder. The Atlanta Braves ace, Charlie Morton, facing his former team, the Houston Astros, toughing it out through 16 pitches after taking a 102-mile-an-hour hit off his right leg.
Or off the pitcher's leg for the out.
That one-hop screamer ricocheting all the way to first base. Morton getting 2 more outs to end the second inning, but his leg's starting to swell.
That is lined at Freeman and a 1-2-3 second.
At the bottom of the 3rd inning, Morton throwing a curveball past Jose Altuve, striking him out, but stumbling and starting to fall. His leg giving out, that right fibula fractured.
After that last pitch for the strikeout of Altuve, Charlie Morton is going to exit.
After the game, Braves manager Brian Snitker saying Morton tried to return to the game, but ultimately couldn't.
I mean, just the fact that he wanted to keep going. I mean, they were x-raying him, and that's Charlie. I mean, he wants to be on this stage, and God bless him. I hate it for him. Really hate it for him.
Game over.
The Braves going on to win 6-2. But the team now down an anchor in their pitching rotation. Morton starting 4 games of the postseason, including Tuesday night's contest.
He's a gamer. You knew it had to be pretty bad for him to come out there. You know, he gave it all he had.
Morton's teammates consoling him in the clubhouse. After the game, his selfless response was to say, "I'm sorry."
All right, Steve Patterson, we thank him for that. When we come back, proud of his roots and always proud to be an American, how one Pittsburgh man is trying to change Venezuela one box at a time. And finally tonight, a story we first saw in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette that we wanted to share. The Italian-born, Venezuela-raised, Pittsburgh-loving father who has not forgotten his roots. On his front porch in Pittsburgh, Cesare Pampena's pride is on full display.
Italy gave me the birth. Venezuela, my beautiful family. And United States, they give me the opportunity to help everybody.
An opportunity that became clear after he saw his beloved Venezuela suffer under back-to-back dictatorships. People running out of the most basic of needs, from rice to toothpaste, even shoes. So Cesare came up with an idea. He started buying in bulk, describing in Spanish what he's sending.
Caramello, cuaderno, zapato.
And with the help of his family, they started building care packages.
Ready to go to Santa Maria de Pire, Venezuela.
Sent to the same town where he fell in love. In 1955, Cesare was 18 years old when he moved to central Venezuela. There he met his wife, Mercedes, and they started their own family. They would eventually move to the U.S., settling in Pittsburgh, but never forgetting the family and friends they left in Venezuela.
I used to live about 20 years in Venezuela, and I left there a lot of friends, family, and they asked me for help.
Now that he's retired, Cesare dedicates his time to fundraise and help those back in his Venezuelan hometown.
All this stuff over here behind me, it's why I send vitamins.
His house, like his social media accounts, now a shrine of thank yous.
When they receive the box, they are so happy to have this basic item.
As a sign of their gratitude, the town receiving these care packages has named a plaza and a street after him. So what does Cesare think of all the notoriety? Who knows? He's already busy working on his next package. Best of America right there. We thank Cesare for all of his help and for sharing his story. And we thank you for watching Top Story. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.